pretty sure that all my videos are gonna look crooked from this point going forward because so much of my apartment is crooked. Let's talk about what I read in the month of February. The first book I read this month was Illuminae by Kristoff and Amie Kaufman. I did not know what this was about going forward. I read this because I got hyped book on my Plinko TBR, and I know that this is a very beloved book. I was looking for something that was very, like I was looking for something Firefly-esque, like a crew of ragtag individuals gets together and has camaraderie. That's not what this is. I knew that the format was all over the place and funky and whatever, so I was kind of looking forward to that, I guess. What this actually contained was very much a pandemic contagion situation, which like is something I'm all for because Outbreak was like one of my favorite movies as a kid and Contagion is one of my favorite movies now. So I was actually really intrigued by the idea, but I didn't really like this. I felt like the multimedia format was kind of a gimmick and I just wasn't that into it. It was fine in some aspects, but just kind of annoying in others. I thought that the main teen character, I thought that her diary entries were really realistic, but then at other times I'm just like, holy shit, she's so dumb. I just like, it astounded me the length she would go to save this boy she loves, but I'm just like I didn't find it romantic, I just found it stupid. Not to mention it was really obvious where that storyline was going, and the fact that she didn't see that made me want to punch something. I enjoyed Aiden's progression, but I also felt it kind of predictable. Aiden's EAI, by the way. I did enjoy the gory aspects. Like, this felt like very much a teen novel, but then every once in a while a very gory thing would happen. Like, I remember them talking about this one girl who's dragging like a dirty teddy bear around, but then they realize she's actually dragging around a human heart, and I was just like, yes, give me more of that. I like gore. I like things that are really dark, and whenever there was like those flashes of really dark things, that's when I was like into it, but there wasn't enough of that. I wasn't expecting this to be about two teenagers, and I think that really turned me off of the book. So I ended up giving this 3 to 5 stars. I might listen to the other two on audiobooks, but if I don't, like, I'm not gonna pick them up and read them because like I really just don't care. But I've heard the audiobooks are good, so if they're available, then why not, I guess. I gotta say though, like, I'm so underwhelmed by Illuminated that I just don't understand why people love it so much. Speaking of I don't understand why people love it so much, Punk 57 by Penelope Douglas. So I've mentioned this before, but I just really don't like Penelope Douglas that much. And I know that's like so weird to say because everybody seems to love her writing, and I read a lot of smut, and she just, none of her books have fully worked for me. This one has by far been my least favorite. This book is about two kids who are pen pals for years and years, but they've never met each other, despite living pretty close to each other. Eventually, some things happen, and the male in this situation decides to go to this girl's school, even though she doesn't know who he is, and they interact, and then they start like hooking up, and he still doesn't tell her that he's her pen pal from long ago or whatever. So there's obviously lots of problematic elements to that. Personally, I don't really care. Problematic elements in smut do not bother me. I just found it so cheesy. Like, there was just so much cheese. They were so angsty, and I feel like this is made for like a certain type of person who enjoys a certain type of romance. And I guess that's the problem, is I don't really enjoy romance. I like smutty, dark things, but not so much the romantic aspects of this, and this one was just like all... The sex scenes were good, because I do think Penelope Douglas writes good sex scenes. I just didn't care for either of the characters, and that, I think that was part of it too, is like, I really didn't like the main character at all. I just felt myself wanting to put this book down pretty much the entire time. I never wanted to pick it back up again, but I have a hard time DNFing book, so I did finish it, and I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. It wasn't for me, like, at all. And I think this is probably the last time I will try Penelope Douglas's work, except for maybe finishing out the Devil's Night series, because that's the one series I do at least kind of enjoy. The next book I read was finally a book I enjoyed. This one was Take It Back by Abdullah. Going into this book, all I knew was that it was a courtroom drama thriller about a girl who accuses 4 boys of rape. That was all I knew, and that's all the synopsis really said, but what they didn't mention is that she is a disabled white girl and that the 4 boys she accused are Muslim boys. They also didn't mention that the main protagonist is the Muslim, not lawyer, but like her social worker, I guess? I can't remember what they called her, but she used to be a lawyer and now she works with rape victims. This obviously had a lot to do with racial tensions, and I thought it did a really good job of explaining that, and there were certain things that like I couldn't quite understand and seemed totally jarring because I personally don't know a lot about the Muslim community, so certain things that they would mention about like the girl's background and her family, I was just like, wait, what? I do feel like there were certain parts that were kind of emotionally manipulative, and I wish they hadn't used those things. I wish they hadn't done those things because it kind of cheapened the story, but overall, like, this was so good. It was powerful, but of course it is about race, because anytime people of color are in a courtroom being accused of something, of course race is going to play a part in it. But as a white girl, she of course couldn't understand that. I think there was just so many layers to this story, with her being disabled, with the accused being Muslim. There was just a lot to take in, and I feel like I'm doing such a poor job of explaining it because I did read it closer to the beginning of the month, but like, it was so good, and I haven't heard anyone talk about it, and I think more people should be reading this. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. So I feel like I did an absolutely atrocious job at explaining this book, and I really think it's a great book that more people need to read. So instead of trying to explain what this book is about, I'm going to read 2 of my favorite parts of this book because I feel like letting the book speak for itself is a better idea. So the first part I bookmarked is this. Oppression doesn't spread through men with guns or bombs on trains. Oppression spreads when women like you tell their daughters to marry a certain man, or wear a certain dress, or work a certain job. It happens when women like you tell us, gently and with all the love in the world, not to peek above the parapet, instead to stay at home, to be quiet, to be kind, to be good. And then the other part I wanted to read was this. A flashpoint in race relations, said the pundits. It's not, Jody wanted to tell them, it's not about race, but rape. But the case was no longer about her. It wasn't a flashpoint, it was a war, and everyone had their own agendas. The next thing I read was The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. This book is about a girl who I believe went to summer camp when she was about 13, and 3 of her roommates at that summer camp went missing and were never heard from again. Now she's an artist, and the summer camp has been closed all these years, but it's finally reopening, and the person who runs the summer camp wants her to come back. So she decides to go and try to uncover what happened all those years ago. This is not exactly the most original story I've ever heard, but I feel like it was really well told. I read Final Girls by Riley Sager last year and I enjoyed it, but there were so many problems with it that I was kind of annoyed. Whereas this, I feel like was actually pretty well executed. There was no gigantic glaring problems. I mean, there were definitely plot holes, but that's to be expected with a lot of thrillers, to be honest. Whereas in Final Girls, it was like gigantic glaring plot holes. But here, it was just little things that would bug me, but overall, like, I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed the ending. I felt like the girls were actually pretty well fleshed out, which was kind of surprising because I feel like sometimes female friendship can be put off like, oh, she's such a bitch, and like, they're all so catty and whatever. And this definitely had essences of that, but I feel like you actually got a lot of layers to like the typical mean girl, and I enjoyed that. There were some threads and some storylines that kind of irritated me because they kind of went nowhere, but overall, I liked it. I'm glad that this was better than the first book I read by Riley Sager, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next thing I read was Bad Saint by Monica James. This was a smut book about a girl who is kidnapped on her honeymoon, and eventually they end up shipwrecked on an island, her and her kidnapper. I did not like this, like at all. The first couple chapters are so badly written and they're so cliche. Like, just the most cliche of the like naive Southern belle who comes from like a bad background and just wants someone to love her, and like, I don't know, just every sentence I was like rolling my eyes and hating it. I knew that this book was supposed to take place on a shipwrecked island sort of situation, and that's why I went into this book. But that doesn't happen until like 60% of the way through the book, and I was getting so bored trying to get there. I was getting so irritated. I just wanted them to wreck the damn boat, because like, I didn't care about any of the crap on the boat. It was boring. I've seen it all before. I just wasn't interested. Once I got to the island, things actually started to get a little more interesting. I enjoyed the dynamic there so much more. And then the ending came. It was predictable. It was kind of dumb, and I don't want to read the next one. So yeah, they're no longer on the island by the end of the first book. So that took away the one thing I liked about this book. So I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. Next thing I read was Take Me, Break Me by Carly Silverwood. I don't even know how I ended up with this on my Kindle, but I'm so glad I did. This is a pretty hardcore erotica book about a girl who's an artist of some sort, and she decides that she's gonna make a documentary about captivity, basically, I guess. So she enlists her ex-boyfriend to kidnap her, sort of, and hold her in his basement, basically, for a month. He's allowed to do whatever he wants to her. They sign this, like, legal contract, whatever, so that they don't go too far. Anyways, she's gonna make a documentary and sell it because she needs money, whatever. Things go awry pretty quickly when he realizes that he enjoys this just a little too much, and I don't even know what to say. This is just straight up porn. Like, seriously, there was no plot, and I loved it so much. I am always looking for a smut book that takes things a little bit farther and goes like across that line a little bit more. And this was that, because like, I'm so sick of reading books that just like promise me something and don't deliver. This was the opposite. I had no idea what to expect going into this, and it delivered. I've heard that the books just get darker from here, so that excites the crap out of me. The one thing I will say is that there is no really character development or anything. I really didn't like the female character. The male character is great, he's fine, whatever. But the female character, he'll talk about how she's a little bit manipulative, and you definitely see that, so she was kind of annoying, but whatever. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars because, yeah, I very much enjoyed it. Although, forewarning for a scene with needles. The next thing I read was Kin by Kealan Patrick Burke. I didn't know what to expect going into this book. I don't think I really even understood what this book was about. This is a horror novel taking place in this town where there is a bunch of cannibalistic hillbillies. For years and years, they've been abducting people from the roads, torturing them, killing them, and eating them. This book starts off when one of their victims gets away, and she is found on the road by 2 people who live in this town and taken to the doctor and basically saved. And the book kind of goes from there. There's multiple perspectives. One of the sons of this cannibalistic family. There's the girl who gets away. There's the boy of the dad who finds the girl on the road. And then there's like the doctor briefly, kind of. Oh yeah, and then there's the stepmom of the boy. So it's definitely a lot. Some of it seems unnecessary, like the stepmom's point of view. I'm not really sure how that added much. But I really enjoyed that. I want to read more horror novels. Horror movies are like my favorite genre. I've seen a crap load of them. They're my favorite thing to watch. But there's just not a lot of horror books, and I don't know where to look because I don't like Stephen King. I've tried it. I've read 8 of his books. They're not for me. So I need suggestions. This one was very enjoyable. I will say, if you are Southern, I might not read this because, like, I mean, it's kind of offensive, the cannibalistic hillbilly thing. But, I mean, I feel like for a lot of people this would be really cliche depending on how many of these types of movies you've seen, because, I mean, they're definitely out there. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Hills Have Eyes, you know, think along those lines, and that's what this is. I've seen those movies, but I saw them like a million years ago, so I kind of don't remember them. So for me, this was still fresh. And it was very visceral. It is stomach turning, but really fun. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next thing I read this month was TheOne by John Mars. This is about a world in which there is an app or a company of some sort that can find your soulmate. There's only one person out there in the world who is your other half, and this app will find it through your blood. I thought I was going to really like this, but honestly, it was kind of a disappointment. I thought this was going to be a lot more of a thriller than it was. I would compare this as a thriller to Liane Moriarty's books, and I love Liane Moriarty. But the thing that Liane Moriarty does really well is she writes women well. She understands them, she understands the way they think, and she can execute it flawlessly. Whereas in this book, the characters are just like nothing. Like, I could not tell you a single characteristic about any of these characters other than maybe the serial killer or the businesswoman. And that's only because they're very cliched stereotypes. The other 3 main characters just don't have personalities. What I wish more than anything is that each of these storylines, each of these perspectives were turned into their own book and it was made a series. Because all of the stories in this book are very interesting, but they're not fleshed out enough to make me care. Like, whenever the like twist came or something, like, I don't give a shit because I don't give a shit about these characters. I barely know them. I also don't like the ending. I feel like every single ending in this was like too wrapped up, a little too neatly. I found it very easy to read. Every chapter is like really short and you can kind of just fly through it, which is what I did. But I just feel like it was such a good premise and it didn't quite get there. I gave TheOne 3 out of 5 stars. The next thing I finished was Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I'm sure most of you know what this is about, but this is about the Prince of England, I guess, and the son of the President of the United States, and they date, and that's pretty much it. I started this in January but never finished it, so I picked it back up in February. Obviously, a lot of people love this book. I enjoyed it, but it didn't quite get to the level of like, oh my god, obsession. I love the banter in this book. I love the characters and the character dynamics. Every character in this is great and fun, and like all their interactions are adorable. My thing is, I'm just not a romance person. Every time I put this book down, I didn't really feel like picking it up again. I think the thing with romance is there's nothing that propels me forward. Like, I know what's gonna happen. They're gonna get together. They're gonna live a happily ever after. So why am I trying to finish it, I guess? Every time I picked it up, I was happy. I enjoyed it. I was smiling. I was laughing, but I just didn't really care about it that much. I am gonna keep it and probably reread it at some point because, like I said, I do enjoy the characters a lot. Although I gotta say, like, I love Alex, but I love him as a character. I would hate to be friends or have to date this person. But that's besides the point. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I'll totally read Casey McQuiston's next book. The next thing I read was 3 Women by Lisa Taddeo. I listened to this on audiobook. This book is a non-fiction book. It is an exploration of female desire. It follows 3 different women. One who had an affair with the teacher. I mean, affair in so much that it was statutory rape because she was in high school and he was her high school teacher. One woman who kind of, sort of, has an open relationship with her husband, Basically, she sleeps with other men because he enjoys watching it. And then another woman who is cheating on her husband and having an affair with a married man who was her high school sweetheart. I'm not really totally sure what this had to say about female desire. Maybe it's just because like I'm younger, or like young-ish, and I don't really see the taboo of female desire anymore. Obviously, I get that there are still certain social constructs and certain social ideals and whatever, but for the most part, I've always felt pretty comfortable with my own sexual desire and my ability to talk openly about it and do something about it and whatever. So I've never felt any sort of taboo-ness to it, I guess. But besides the point of that, I really just enjoyed this book because I'm a nosy bitch and because I enjoy listening to people talk about their sex lives. The most interesting one, of course, to me was the girl who had hooked up with our teacher, because I don't know, those stories will always get to me because it's just heart-wrenching to hear about how she was groomed, how she was victimized, and like just the things the teacher didn't said and how he got away with it, like always. It was gross, but interesting to read about. It was maddening to hear some of the details of it because you just can't imagine how he got away with it when it just seems so freaking obvious. The other two stories weren't as interesting, but probably because they weren't as raw. The one especially with the cheating was not my favorite because I don't love cheating, and I have a hard time just chalking up to like, oh well, she's finally understanding her own desire and taking charge. Like, I mean, no. She could have done this with an unmarried man after her divorce, but whatever. It was fun, and I gave it 3.5 stars. I also read 2 short stories this month. The first was The Turtle Boy by Kealan Patrick Burke. I didn't really enjoy this. I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. It wasn't that well written, but this is a series, and I'm reading the second short story in the collection, and I'm enjoying it a lot more, so I do think they get better with time. I think the first one was just written when he was really young, like it was his first story, and so it just wasn't that well written compared to his newer stuff. But it's horror, and I'm happy to have some. And then the second short story I read was The Last Conversation by Paul Tremblay. This was some sort of Amazon thing, and I listened to this through the audio narration, and this was about a person who wakes up in some sort of lab situation and you're slowly finding out what's happening. The ending was decent, but like I didn't really enjoy my time with it, if I'm being honest. It was a quick listen, and I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. So those were all the things I read this month. It was a pretty good month considering I honestly didn't think I was going to get anything read. I hope you liked this video, and I hope you'll come back again for more. Bye.